talks will be related to transportation. And the first of these will be given by Pravin, who's the only person in this room who's been at Berkeley longer than I have. And the title of the talk is Intelligent Interactions.
Intersection. So the people I've worked with are two of them, Offer and Aditya, work at the research group called SafeTrek, which worries about safety in transportation. Alex Grujanski works at the PATH, which is Institute for Transportation. And Mingqiao Yu is a graduate student in transportation. She works on demand modeling. But the first question you might ask is why intersections and not other things? And so that's the reason why intersections. So they are, as I put it, small killing fields. And a huge number of accidents and fatalities occur in intersections, which is sort of maybe 5% of the road system, or small, but has a disproportionate number of accidents, fatalities, serious accidents, so on. And so that's something. Then the second bullet is just that you all experience red light running, that they cause about 165,000 accidents and 700 to 800 fatalities each year. So why are intersections such a concentration of accidents and fatalities? And that's the next blue column, that they have complex geometry, as you can see in the left. They have complex operating rules, as you can see in that timing diagram and with all those arrows, and their signs are complicated, right? So these three things make it difficult to navigate through the intersection. The reason that the fatalities are low compared to the proportion of crashes is because they're low speed, right? If all these people travel at 40 miles per hour, then the fatalities would be 3, 4, 5 times more than they are. So the promise of automated vehicles, that's what I want to discuss. So the first quote there is from Waymo, that used to be Google. And you have 1.2 million lives lost around the world each year in traffic accidents. And 94% involve human error. And our technology is going to take care of that, and so we're going to save thousands of lives. That's the Waymo. The next one is from GM. They have a company called Cruise, which does automated vehicles for GM, and they have the same quote, except the number of dead people are higher in GM, 1.25 as opposed to 1.2, but the report is 1 year later. And 40,000 in the US alone. That's too is a little bit inflated. And human error is a major contributing factor, and our vision is 0 crashes. So that's the promise made by automated vehicle manufacturers. So what does that technology depend on? And so there's a simplification. It depends on deep learning and simulation. The first quote is from Elon Musk, who says, if you solve vision, you've solved automation. If you haven't solved vision, you haven't solved automation. So that's Musk's belief about how Teslas will work, because they'll solve the vision problem, and then you can drive. Waymo is a little bit more sedate, so they have driven 3.5 million real-world miles autonomously, and they predict the intentions of other agents, which obviously is not just from the vision, but they visualize everything they see, and they simulate the hell out of everything. So every time they have an incident, they have 20,000 simulations per scenario, and you wonder what in the world they do. And they do something called fuzz, which is, suppose you have 10 objects in there and you just perturb them for so many times, you can easily get 200,000, right? 20,000. So that's their approach. And you can read all that in the safety report. Just for comparison, US statistics is 100 million vehicle miles per fatality and 1.2 million vehicle miles per crash, okay, or per injury rather. So let's look at the safety record. So this is very difficult to get, right? What is the safety record of autonomous vehicles? But in California, the companies that do testing have to file an annual report, something called a disengagement report. And a disengagement report is every time the safety driver took over from the autonomous driving, right? And he took over because of the things written in blue. There's a safety significance, and according to Google or Waymo, the engineers should pay attention to what happened, and so they disable the automated vehicles, right? So that's a disengagement report. In fact, there's 100 times more disengagement reports, but these are the ones that Waymo reports to the California DMV, saying that there is a safety issue. So I'm assuming that that means that if that operator had not intervened, that might lead to a crash. So then you can compare Waymo's record of 5,000 miles per disengagement with human driving, which is between 200 and 500,000 miles human driving between crashes. Right, so currently, if you take that estimate, or even if you inflate and make it 10 times, then it's 50,000 miles per crash in a Waymo car versus 200 to 500,000 miles driving with you. so that's the contrast. So it's a long ways to go. And I haven't put down the latest thing, which is that there was an Uber automated vehicle which killed somebody, right? Now, I'm going to analyze why these accidents occur, and I'm going to take as an example an Uber crash, an Uber automated vehicle crash in Tempe, Arizona. That's where also the accident occurred. And just to go through what's going on. So on the bottom left is the police report. So you can see there's 3 lanes going from north to south, plus a turn lane. All right, so you can see the turn lane is marked by the arrow, and there's 3 lanes going up and a turn lane. Okay, so what happened on that particular date? There was a driver coming here and making a turn. An Uber vehicle is going straight down. These 2 lanes are blocked. That is, there's traffic there, right? And there's saturation, so they're blocked on the other side as well as blocked here. But this lane is clear, and so the Uber vehicle goes at 38 miles per hour in a 40 mile per hour zone, and it enters this thing when the light is yellow, right? Which is okay. I mean, you're allowed to do that, and that's according to Uber. That's their vehicles are programmed that way. That if it's yellow, it assumes it's green and goes through. It drives as if it's green, not assumes it's green. This vehicle went through and saw these 2 who were blocked. It stops over here, doesn't see anybody coming down here, so proceeds. And all of a sudden, this vehicle comes and crashes into it. After the Uber crashes, it's going at 40 miles per hour. This vehicle is going about 5 miles an hour. It hits a pole, flips on its side, hits 2 other vehicles, and that's the end result. That's the Uber automated vehicle. Those are the other 2 parked vehicles, sort of unfortunately in the way of the Uber. Okay, so the question is what, this is an animation of what happened. All right. So on the left is what the left-turning vehicle sees, and on the right is what the Uber sees. So the left-turning vehicle goes there, comes to a stop, doesn't see anybody, and then proceeds. And what happened here? Maybe it's easiest to see on the top. You see the Uber goes straight, the other vehicle turns, and then they meet. So what happens is neither one sees the other. So let's look at the lessons from this crash. So as far as I can tell, there were at least 4 errors, you might call unforced errors. So the spatial and temporal uncertainties. So the first one, the Uber did not know that the traffic in the opposing lane could turn left, right? I mean, there's no way for you to know. All it sees is its own light, red, yellow, green. It doesn't know what the other vehicle is, what kind of light it has. So it doesn't know that. Secondly, it did not predict that the light would become yellow. It's going at 40 miles an hour, and then the light becomes yellow, and it just goes through. If it knew that, it might have slowed down. I don't know. Then the Uber operator saw the Honda, but had no time to react. Right? That's the quote from the operator. As traffic in the first 2 lanes on his left had created a blind spot, so couldn't see that left-turning vehicle. The Honda driver, and that's a quote from her, is about to cross the third lane. So it first crossed the first two lanes where cars are parked, and about the third, and suddenly saw a car flying through the intersection, but couldn't brake fast enough to stop. So those are the 4 errors. So it could have been prevented if some information were provided to these 2 drivers. What are the information? So the crash may have been prevented by providing phase prediction. So you could have told that the phase, this light is going to turn yellow in 5 seconds, 4 seconds, 3 seconds, 2 seconds, and then you might have responded to that by stopping. The phase would have also told the Uber that a left turn in front of the car is permitted. It didn't know that. So that's another possibility. Then there's a blind spot information. So the other vehicle was in a blind spot, which is temporarily created by the 2 obstacles next to the Uber. So if the blind spot occupied message had been given to the Uber, that could have prevented. And similarly, there's a blind spot information to the Honda that there's a vehicle coming in the lane that you cannot see, but there is a vehicle there coming that might have stopped. So all this information can be provided by the intersection. But an automated vehicle in its sensors has no way to get that information. Right? So the thing I want to say is that if we had intersections which provide information, then that could avoid these sorts of accidents. Now that's anathema to automated vehicle manufacturers. They want all their intelligence to be self-contained in the vehicle. They do not want to rely on anything the public provides them, right? So that's a big issue. Yes?
Why is there a left turn permitted from the right lane anyway?
It's not in the right lane.
No, that's the middle. The left is the other lane.
No.
Isn't that guy turning left?
No, this is turning left. Right? This is,
Oh, sorry.
so it's not, no, it's the leftmost, it's the correct place to go. There's a different issue, you would say, as a traffic engineer, is how in the world Tempe permits so-called permissive left turns in a 40-mile-per-hour zone. That's not permitted by code. But in Arizona, it's sort of free west country, wild west. Other intersection crash scenarios. I've just listed 6 of them here. Very, very common. This is the way all these intersections occur. Had nothing much to do with driver being alert or not alert, right? It's really a lot to do with not knowing what in the world is going on and no way for you to know, so you have to guess. Okay? This one is not, this one you know. This is a red light violation. This guy is moving, he's 7 seconds into the red light. And he's moving. Fortunately, this one is alert, so he has slowed down, otherwise they would have crashed. This is a scenario where there's a limited line of sight. So he's green, he slows down and hits that pedestrian, which is a little bit similar to the accident in the Uber case. So what will an intelligent intersection do? Basically, it would remove this temporal and spatial uncertainty that I talked about, right? And it's present in all those 6 scenarios that I showed. So the first one is to inform the vehicle of the complete signal phase, not just what you see, but what are the lights everybody else sees, or what movements are permitted, and predict the time of the next change. The second one is to inform vehicle of potential conflict zones where you can hit somebody else, right? And the third one is if there are blind spots which prevent you to see what's happening in that conflict zone, right? And the last one is sort of out of that intersection really is to warn of vehicles making red light violations. Just to ideas of how you predict when the phase is being changed. So let's suppose that these are different phases. I won't tell you what P1, P2, etc. means, but you are sitting here or coming here, and you want to make a left turn. So you've got to wait for your signal. And currently, these people are going this way, P4 and P. So you want to be able to predict when this light is turning green, or conversely, these people want to predict when their green light turns red. You cannot do it. I mean, these are actuated signals, so that means that the amount of time that it takes to turn depends upon how much traffic there is, and you don't know that, right? However, you can do a statistical prediction. So if I'm interested in changing P1, then when does P4 end? So that's a random number, random P4, the time. But you can get it historically, or you can measure it over the last 2 days, 1 day, hour, etc., and produce a probability distribution of the duration of that particular phase. And then, depending on how long you've been in that phase, the intersection can predict what is the conditional distribution of the lefting time. And so this is a picture of the conditional expectation of the remaining duration. Okay. It's interesting because it's actuated, it can keep going down and then suddenly jump up and then keep going down, right? So it cannot be simply a countdown timer which has started and then keep going down, right? It's like your file download goes down and then all of a sudden goes up. So that can be done, and the intersection has enough information to calculate this thing and either put it up or broadcast it or whatever. Let's see, how can you get conflicts? So here's the idea about conflicts. So how many movements are there? If I take a four-legged intersection, from each approach, you can have 3 movements, left, straight, or through. So multiply by 4, that's 12. Plus you have similarly 12 bicycle movements, so it's 24. And you have 4 pedestrian movements, right? So 28. So these are the possible movements that can happen simultaneously, or some of them simultaneously, at any given time. So let's look at somebody who wants to just make a right turn. So that's the potential trajectory. And let's look at all the ones who are making right turns. So you get what we call a guideway. So that's this blue thing. There are similarly other movements, right? So where 2 guideways come together, intersect, that's a potential zone of conflict. So the vehicle wants to make sure that it can traverse through that potential zone of conflict, okay? So let's look at it a little bit closer. So we're looking at this white potential trajectory, which this wants to make. How many other conflicts are there? Well, there's the white trajectories are other vehicles. There's 1 and 2. This vehicle may make a left turn. This vehicle can go through. It doesn't know yet. I mean, this is just offline. All this stuff is offline calculation. So there are 2. There are 3 black bicycle trajectories. There's a bicycle trajectory over here. There's a bicycle trajectory through, and a bicycle left turn. And 2 pedestrians, right? So 2 and 3, 5 and 2, 7. So there's 7 conflicting other movements that you need to worry about. Not all of them can happen because you have some information from your signal. You have other information from what you can see. So we can eliminate some of these conflicts, okay? So let's see what can be eliminated. So these are the 7 conflict zones. I'm just drawing them like that. They're all sort of bunched together. And those are the potential movements from other agents. So now, you are the ego vehicle. They all call them ego. I don't know why. But anyway, that's ego vehicle. And there are 7 potential other agents. And I've marked them as U1 through U7. User 1 through user 7, potential, not adversaries, but people you might, or agents you might collide with. So I'm assuming that this one can already see U5, U6, and U7. And I assume that if you can see them, you can avoid hitting them, right? So I eliminate those 3 possibilities. I assume you can also see U1 from your side view mirror or whatever, so, or your all-round radar or all-round camera. So we can get rid of U1, U5, U6. That leaves 3, U2, U3, U4. One of them is a pedestrian, 2 are vehicles, okay? Now, his vision, whatever system has, is obstructed by this obstacle. So it cannot see U2, U3, U4. You can suspect, I mean, that is a potential conflict which is known ahead of time, right? Because it's simply a geometry measure. So now how in the world can E resolve U2, U3, U4? Well, it needs information from the intersection because right this way it cannot do anything more, right? So there are 2 information you can get. Number 1 is what is the phase everywhere else? And number two is if this is still possible, there's a blind spot, then somebody has to tell that there is something there. Let's see from the phase. It is making a right turn on red. So it sees the red. Right? There are 4 other signal arrangements which are compatible with this one seeing red. One is red, and movement can go east to west and west to east, so that's one possibility. It is red, that is red, that is red, but this one can go straight and make a left turn. That's another possibility. Or the symmetric this way and that way. Okay. Now, if it is 2, so the intersection tells it that it's 2 or 3 or 4, that gives the complete phase. So if it's 2, that's pretty good, because then that's red, so none of these can go. So you can see that a lot of the stuff can be eliminated in the favorable case where, knowing the other phase, you can rule out the movement of U3, U4, U2 and assume that they are driving legally. Right? So if that is, but if it is still this one, it cannot rule out U3, U2, U4. So now you need information from the intersection to say whether this blind spot is occupied or not. So I'll leave it to some designer of sensing on the intersection to say whether it's possible or not. And let's go somewhere. So let's look at back to the Uber crash. This car is turning left. It's in the way of 1, 2, 3, 4 intersection. 4 is the pedestrian crossing, so it's in the way of 4 guideways. But these 2, it can see, are already stopped. So these 2 are no longer conflict zones which can be awakened. This one it doesn't know, right, because it's empty. So that's a potential conflict zone. And I assume that it can also see over here that there is somebody or there isn't anybody making the cross. So the only thing is that one, right? And so let's suppose I'm drawing the situation as if this were automated instead of the other. It makes no difference. So this is automated, so it can see all around, and that's its vision zone, right? This ellipsoid could be spherical, whatever. And the other vehicle is over here. So it wants to know whether there is another vehicle. The answer is it depends. So if these 2 guideways are occupied, which is where it was, right? There's cars parked over here, then you can see that this area is obstructed, so it cannot tell that there's a vehicle coming here. Right? So that's ready, that creates a blind spot which could be occupied and could lead to an accident. So what is necessary is for this vehicle to be informed that somebody is occupied here, and conversely, for this vehicle to be informed that somebody's occupying over here. So that's what the sensors have to do. There are ways to do this calculation and to get a reasonably good idea of whether it is or is not occupied, but I won't do that. And just to so I'll skip that. If you knew that, the Uber vehicle would stop. But this is the red light violation. So the picture I showed you was this. That's part of a frame that we had an intersection camera, and we took these movies. So this one is way back, and still during red, it's moving. Fortunately, he has the right of way, obviously. Observes that, slows down and swerves a little bit, so this one passes through without a crash. This is a Google vehicle in the same situation. It went through, it did not go through a red light, but this truck went through a red light exactly 7 seconds into the red and hit the Google car. Fortunately, the driver is on the other side. Same thing with the woman and the Uber vehicle was on the other side, so it was protected. But the driver says he was looking and saw this vehicle, but too late. But could easily have been warned. So these things, you may have gotten a red light ticket from a camera. right, red light violation ticket. So the camera, I mean the sensors in the road says that this vehicle is going at X speed and is not going to be able to stop here. So it takes several shots of the camera. So that could also be used to warn the driver. Or alternatively, it could be used to extend the red light for this one and allow this one to go through. So that's another possibility it could do. But anyway, so it is possible to ameliorate or mitigate or reduce the number of red light violations. What is the probability of something happening? I don't know how you do that, but here's an idea. So this is sort of the Uber scenario. So these 2 lanes are blocked. This one wants to make a right turn. I want to know what's the probability, and there's somebody coming, a pedestrian, and this one cannot see the pedestrian because it's blocked. So what's the probability of a crash? So I'm saying, what's the probability of somebody making a right turn on red? And I'm assuming that this is a cycle, right, 2-minute cycle or whatever, during a peak period. So this is high traffic. So what is the probability of somebody trying to make a right turn on red? What's the probability multiplied by the probability that automated vehicle or individual's view is blocked, and the probability that there's a pedestrian crossing at the same time? So I'm assuming that the product of all these 3 is the probability of a potential crash. In a high traffic scenario, peak period scenario, I'm assuming right turn on red probability is 1. People on the right turn all want to make it. I'm assuming high traffic, there will be blockage, so that probability is 1. So the probability is, what is the chance of pedestrian crossing? Well, that's pretty high, except that pedestrians are smart, so they're not going to, they will stop. They are not relying on automated things. So that's number 2. If there's a lot of traffic, pedestrian traffic, this vehicle will stop. I mean, you realize that there's a lot of people crossing in front of you, you'll stop. If there's very few vehicles, very few pedestrians, then this probability will be small, but you will not stop, you will keep going, right? It's the intermediate case where this is reasonably high and you are likely to make a right turn on red. So that's so summary. AVs, automated vehicles, don't know intersection phase. They cannot predict when the phase will change. They don't see obscured agents, even though they have perfect sensing, right? This difficulty still remains. And so the intelligent intersection can remove the spatial and temporal uncertainty. And this is what it can do. Now, if you want, has anybody seen that video? So this is the video of, so last Sunday, that's the driver of the Uber, killed that pedestrian, right, last Sunday in Tempe. The pedestrian was visible to you, and this is a shot through a dash cam, right? So it's a very poor resolution. And you could see when the thing stopped, and that's the driver. That's the camera of the driver. So you can take a look about that. The driver is clearly not watching. You can see the pedestrian. So the driver was not watching, and finally, according to the driver, the pedestrian appeared from all of a sudden, and the first time she noticed was when it hit. This Uber is equipped with LiDAR, equipped with radar all the way around, equipped with cameras, and it's clear, right? There's nothing wrong in the scene, and it missed that pedestrian. The LiDAR didn't miss the pedestrian, but whatever the signal processing capabilities missed the pedestrian. So I think it's way too early yet to have automated vehicles on the road and expect to have to call in your Uber automated vehicle and take you somewhere. So let me stop over here.
We got time for a couple quick questions. Yes.
So if you provide all this information, let's say from intersection, and wouldn't you create the sensory overload for the driver, that there's too many things to watch? I mean, it becomes like a pilot in a cockpit, and then you need.
Yes and no. I mean, if you're automated, you don't care, right? I mean, this is just very tiny information compared to what your radar and LiDAR is seeing, right? It's trivial. Second, you've seen countdown timers, right, for phase change. So Audi is proposing to install a countdown timer in their cars, which will tell you 15, 14, 13, whatever it is, right? So that's the countdown. The other information is the phase. That's very, I mean, you can, if you go to China, on some streets, on some intersections, they provide you the phase which has all the green and all the red are. So I don't think that's difficult, but you can imagine that. About blind spot, well, currently many cars have blind spot detectors on their sides. So this is an additional blind spot detector, which is mobile in a way, and for blind spots which occur simply because there's an obstruction. So I'm not sure about that, but certainly that's an issue.
So, so when this automated cars thing came along, there were two visions. One was the DSRC vision, V2V, V2I, and then there was this totally autonomous vision LiDAR thing,
Correct.
which seems to have
Taken over.
But interestingly, on the other side, because the spectrum was allocated by the FCC, and there was tremendous pressure to use that spectrum, there was use it or lose it fear. So they did premature standardization, and that DSRC does not work.
Right.
And now they may be losing that spectrum.
Yes.
So this V2V wireless capability is actually going out. That's what they say.
Right.
Things are actually pretty bad.
Right. So, I mean, if you talk to Intel, they say it doesn't matter because 5G will take care.
Let's think.